Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to another week of our AOM streams. We are showing a little bit of our new game, Agents of Mayhem, every week until we release on August 15th, so it's a lot of stuff. Generally, we're focusing on the different playable agents in the game, but today we got something kind of big for this stream, so we're going to get into it pretty quick. Hi, I'm Josh Stinson. I'm the video editor here at Volition, and today in the couch we've got...
Evan Cox, lead tech animator on AOM.
Mike Jungbluth, lead animator.
I'm Rob Rypka. I'm a programmer.
Isaac Vanier, I'm a programmer too.
And so you guys are going to be giving a little presentation today. Mike, this is actually a modified version of the GDC one you had this year, correct?
Yep, did this back in March.
And what is this presentation all about?
This is, so essentially from the time we really started the animation on AOM, I was keeping notes and videos and pictures and everything with the idea that when it was done, it would be cool to like show our entire process, like the nuts and bolts, everything on how we did what we did. And this is the result of that.
All right. So with that, I guess we should just get right into it.
All right, sweet. All right, so let's dig in. This is what it takes to animate an Agent of Mayhem. Hook me up with that keyboard.
Oh, yeah, you go.
Boom. All right. So, first thing to establish, though, is what does Agents of Mayhem mean to us in the animation team? The way I personally like to think about it is that it's G.I. Joe meets Saints Row. It's an open-world game with a set of vibrant, diverse characters, an 80s cartoon aesthetic, and the over-the-top, irreverent tone of past Volition games. But I could sit here and say more words and explain it, or we can just watch our newest trailer that came out on Tuesday.
Oh snap.
No!
It's really quiet.
They have audio?
They have it, yeah.
Okay. Audio.
It's actually better without audio, you guys. This is awesome.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. The
audio is great.
Rules.
I'm kidding.
The Knight Rider
horrible.
theme, man.
It's horrible without audio.
Showing a bunch of our villains. Sweet rides.
Can you still hear us?
Yeah, they can hear both.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're hearing everything.
There's no hiding here.
Everything's laid bare for all.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I love showing a bunch of our cool skins.
Space lizard.
Space laser.
Who's ready to
Sweet Scheherazade is banging. I love that skin for Rama. Yeah. Love that Fortune skin too. Got that Fortune hair? Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
I'm cosplaying today.
Giant robots? What?
That's fun.
And if people don't know, like, we really did get David Hasselhoff to narrate that.
Oh, yes.
If you did not realize,
Oh, yes.
Was that David Hasselhoff? I couldn't hear it.
You heard it. You heard it, Isaac. All right. So working on this game has been a dream project for the animation team. It's required the animation department to focus on character development that integrates both narrative and game design. We actually have the ability to implement and drive the game feel and fluidity of the characters themselves, and it's wrapped up in this really awesome stylized aesthetic and tone. So really, what more could an animator and technical animator and animation programmers even dream for? Nothing.
Nothing.
That was the
That's
dream.
right.
Yeah, absolutely nothing.
That was it.
But as with every dream, there are challenges that threaten to turn it into a terrible nightmare. And for us, the scary part of our dream was that it was going to have a large cast of unique, playable characters in an open world. And this is scary because that would mean each character needed out-of-combat movement, combat abilities, interactions, vehicles, essentially all the things. Which means the million-dollar question was, how many characters do we want to play as? Answering that question from a very early state was, it meant that we needed to define and understand a number of variables. So a good place to start doing that and trying to answer those questions and understanding the expectations that people were going to have was by looking at what other games were out there at the time. But we had no really direct competitor that could give us all of our answers, because that would have been easy. Games with multiple hero characters are largely arena-based. They're focused on usually one primary mechanic, which is often combat. Fluidity and feel of multiple mechanics is usually fairly limited. And then on the flip side, in open world games, they're largely focused on one playable character, which has a deep suite of moves that fluidly support all of the mechanics within one another. So our directive was that we wanted to focus on the unique individual personalities of a character that you'd get in a MOBA, but with the higher fidelity of movement to be competitive with other open world games. So again, our directive was all the things. All of them.
All of them.
The one thing we did know, however, was that the team and the tools. This is the largest animation team Volition has had on a project, with twice the number of animators and dedicated technical animators focused entirely editor side for the majority of the project. This is also the first project to use Motion Builder, hype, as 3ds Max and Biped were what was used on previous games. So thankfully we had the support of the studio to rise up to the challenge at hand. Animation programmers, how many previously on SR games?
One per project.
One per project.
Yeah, we had other gameplay programmers doing animation jobs, but one dedicated anim programmer.
I think this is actually the first time I'm technically credited as an animation programmer
Yeah.
on a game.
So yeah, we got some strength behind us this time, which helps a lot with all those scary things that we're being asked for. But before you can even start animating a character and digging into all that stuff, you really need to know at their heart who they are, what their personality is. We need to understand both the design and the narrative of each character so that we can communicate a fully realized and cohesive performance. And the way we make sure we're consistent and clear with all this is with the character one sheets. With these sheets, we can quickly define all of the core aspects of a character that we need to communicate with our animation. We see the art, the gameplay design, the high-level narrative goals, their personality and motivation, instead of having a wall of text to always refer to. What this does is it provides a consistent and clear reference point for everyone on the team to check out. So let's break down each portion of a one sheet to see what we consider necessary and important when we're animating an Agent of Mayhem. Oh boy, here we are. All right, so let's start with Fortune, who we all know well at this point. So first up on the sheet, and pretty straightforward, is the character's name, where they're from when they join Mayhem, their concept art, their signature weapons and equipment. So here we have Fortune. While she's originally from Colombia, she was out of Brazil when she joins Mayhem, and she has her drone Glory and 2 pistols. Next, we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What's great about this is that it's used to quickly define the driving objective of the character and define the core motivation as to why they're fighting Legion in the first place. The color of the level that you can see is then used throughout the rest of the sheet to make sure that that core objective is remembered and carried throughout everything. So Fortune, she's all about esteem, driven by her confidence and sense of achievement. She doesn't really worry about or feel the need to fight for things like family, security, or basic physiological needs. So whenever we came up with an animation, it should kind of reflect that motivation. Below Maslow's hierarchy triangle is the agent's favorite music. Fortune's music of choice is reggaeton. Figuring out their favorite music actually became one of my favorite elements in the process of animating them. See, a big part of performance of a character is being able to maintain the emotional state of the character when you're performing an action, right? For actors, maintaining that emotional state throughout a shot or an action can be usually measured in minutes. For animators, it's hours or even days. So this is where knowing their favorite music really becomes important. Listening to their favorite genre or artist allows you to stay in their headspace for longer amounts of time. It can speak to and influence the timing and personality choices. And it unlocks additional depth to their character as you search out new artists and become more immersed in the culture of their music. Even if it's a genre of music you dislike, as I initially did with reggaeton, couldn't stand it. Actually sticking with it became an important part of the animation ritual when I was working on a character. So for Fortune, if I wasn't listening to reggaeton every time I started, it just didn't feel right anymore. I know one person, you'll see Hollywood's is like trashy radio pop, and I think he made it about a day and a half before he was like, I can't do this anymore. All right, so next is the design in the middle of the sheet, which is the character's gameplay pillars. This sort of chart Voltron is meant to show how the core agent gameplay relates to the agent's personality. So let's start with the ring around the outside of it. This is the ability ring, which is broken into 5 sections. On the top left is the agent's special ability. This is meant to be used multiple times throughout a battle. Here, Fortune fires off an AoE blast. And in the top right section of the ring is the Agent's Mayhem ability. This is then meant to be used once every few battles. Fortune has her drone Glory come out and create a death blossom that stuns all the enemies around. The bottom 3 sections of the ring are the agent's passive abilities. While these often don't require unique animations, it does help to speak to their playstyle and personality, which is important for animators to keep in mind, as those help to define the character's in-game performance and playstyle. All right, so now looking at the triangle in the middle of the page at the top is what we call the trait force, which itself is broken into 4 sections. So we're going to need to enhance this CSI style. Can you enlarge this for me?
Magic fingers, do your stuff.
Yeah! All right, so this is broken into 4 sections. The triangle at the top is the character's must-have defining characteristic. This is their sort of high-level pitch. Fortune is a high-tech pirate. The triangle at the bottom left is a strength of the character in their personality or gameplay that we want to make sure is often highlighted appropriately. So for Fortune, it's that she has a carefree attitude. The triangle at the bottom right is the potential pitfalls we can see the character falling into. These are areas that we want to make sure we're always weary of, as it could make the character maybe unenjoyable or feel lame. We didn't want Fortune to be too piratey, no R's and ahoy mates, stuff like that. I don't know why I looked at you. It's probably the hair.
Because he was just eating.
Because you're eating cookies. That's a very piratey thing. And the triangle in the middle is the character secret. This is something we don't overtly state to the player or even put in the game necessarily, but it wouldn't even be something that the character might tell anybody else. But it's something we use to help round out the character and give them depth. So with Fortune, she's really just doing all of this for the money and the tech. All right, so this triangle is the agent's unique traversal type. Fortune can air dash. The range triangles in the middle of the Voltron sign there signifies at what range the agent is best suited with their weapons and abilities. Fortune is a short-range character. And then the combat triangle defines what playstyle and role the agent's abilities and weapons fall. Within regards to mayhem, lethality, and durability. I guess I stole your magic fingers there for a second.
You did.
How'd you do that without magic
I
fingers?
know.
I didn't even blow on them?
Yeah.
Do you
Here, blow
have
on my fingers? That's what did it.
Nice. Okay.
It's like a time loop.
Do you have an image enhancer that can bitmap?
Yes.
More
All
like
right,
a time
great.
cube,
Yeah.
Right?
So Fortune is between mayhem and lethality. And mayhem is how much they should be using and relying on their abilities, and lethality is how much damage they can output. And finally, then, we have our coordinate graphs, which are the inherent personality and ability of the characters. On each line of the graph are 2 opposing sets of traits. You then plot the character on the graph where they fit. So really quickly, you can see on the left side is the personality graph, which from top to bottom has reserved versus showy. This describes how flamboyant an agent is. Are they more willing to be the strong silent type, or are they super boisterous in everything they do? Fortune is pretty damn showy. From left to right is lawful versus chaotic. This describes how much an agent follows a sense of order. Are they more honorable, or are they more reckless? Fortune is rather chaotic. On the right is the ability graph, where top to bottom we have natural versus tech. This describes the agent's inherent ability set. Are they naturally capable, or do they rely primarily on their tech? Fortune is right in the middle, meaning that she's as naturally capable and gifted as she is using technology. And then from left to right, we've got team player versus loner, which of course describes how well an agent gets along with others. Are they the type that rallies around teammates, or do they prefer to hang out on their own? Fortune is much more of a loner, reflecting both her placement on Maslow's hierarchy and her secret. So when you step back and you look at all of this as a whole, once you know what it means, you can actually get a really great read very quickly on who Fortune is. So let's take a look at the other franchise Force members we all know and love, so that we'll know how to animate them.
Yeah, I'll do hardtack if you don't mind, Mike.
Take it.
All right.
Hardtack.
Cool. Not scripted at all. Looking at his character one sheet, we can see that he's like a social crass sailor from America, and he doesn't. Can I say that word?
Absolutely.
He doesn't fuck around. He loves classic R&B. Doesn't keep any secrets from nobody. He can wall climb and has a short-range shotgun and is armed with a teleharpoon. And he has explosive depth charges for his abilities. He's pretty lawful, only a little showy, and is a born natural along with being a team player.
What?
And then we have Hollywood. He's from Van Nuys, California, which I know how to say very well. He's the face of Mayhem. He has an automatic rifle. He fires off grenades. He lives for glory and attention of others, basically. He loves trashy radio pop music, as we heard earlier, and that irritates some animators. He's on the lawful side of showy and is more of a born natural than a tech person in his skills and abilities, and that includes air dashing.
Yeah. So these became really great in being able to kind of make sure we had all of our bases covered when we started on a character and communicating forward. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions about defining a character?
We had a couple questions in the chat, but it seems like there are some other animators hanging out in the chat who actually shot them all down already. They already answered all of them.
Sweet! Animation community, go!
Woo! Woo!
I'm not an animator by Woot anyways.
No, you're kissed in.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're part of it now.
All right, sweet.
You're part of it. There's a secret handshake. We'll show you after the stream.
Can you show me?
No,
Yeah.
you're out. All right, so then with our characters more defined, the other core part of the tone we needed to communicate was the game's art style, which is defined on the project as theatrical, simplified, and vibrant. So our animation style needed to match that. And what that boiled down to for animation was the ordinary versus the extraordinary. Boom, words. So ordinary, these would be actions like walking, running, standing, and turning. These would just use standard mocap polish, nothing too crazy. The extraordinary stuff would be things like jumping and double jumping and triple jumping and dashing and special abilities. These were things that we knew would need an exaggerated style. And what's really key about this approach is that it allows style to be used in a sort of non-arbitrary way, attaching more push stylized animations to the more clearly defined gameplay systems. And this is necessary because stylized animations just by their nature take more time than standard mocap polish. So we needed to be smart in how and when we chose to embellish. And that intentionality is what helps to create a unified experience and quality bar and make those unique systems feel even better. So with all that in mind, our first style pillar is the idea of simplified, which we personally interpret as a limited 2D style, matching our overall aesthetic. The timing of extraordinary movements will be snappy and then faster through the motion with longer held poses, at the end conveying the key moments of the movement or the ability. So this means super simple lines of action during the quick movements into more complex, iconic poses once they're in their held state. We sort of like to think of this as a bit like smear poses and less as storytelling poses with those transitions. Now, when I say smear tricks and smear frames as a reference, we aren't actually using any literal smear frames or shader tricks in the game. What we're doing is we're thinking about the poses like smear frames, where we want to reduce the noise and complexity of the pose itself during those snappy transitions. So in this instance, this front flip would be animated in a more traditional style. On the way up, the arms and legs are offset as they rise, which leads into the spin, and then they unroll sort of naturally as descends. This is, offset and sort of all those things are sort of important fundamentals for animators. And what's cool is I think this is actually an old Rama model, right?
It is.
That's nuts.
That's crazy that you noticed that.
Way old.
Whoa.
Way old. Early on Rama model. But when thinking of the poses in a simpler smear manner, on the way up, what we do is we want to have the body, we want the limbs to be brought in, which creates a cleaner, singular line of action, removing complexity and noise. The same should happen when getting into the ball at the apex. Then coming out of the ball, the character should sort of snap out of it in a more iconic in-air pose. When they begin to stretch into the fall, again, the character becomes a clean, singular line of action. It's sort of the essence and intent of smears without having smear tech. So then the next pillar is theatrical, which by attaching our extraordinary actions to gameplay systems, the exaggeration of those abilities and personality moments will help to sort of draw focus towards the theatricality of the character already. So for example, with Fortune's special ability, how her guns create a large ball of energy isn't as important as making sure the action just fits her personality. Wildly launching the blast forward while jumping backwards with a double bounce land It feels like it makes sense, even if you were to like try and think about it. Probably doesn't make any sense.
Makes a little sense.
Makes a little sense.
Little.
A little bit. Just because you're smart. Which leads to our vibrant pillar. This means that the personality of a pose is just as important as the functionality of the pose. Instead of animating, say, a traditional jump, like we saw, which hits the more sort of proper mechanical poses along the way, we wanted to think of the characters more like how Spider-Man would be drawn in a comic. His poses when jumping through the air say less about the mechanics of the jump itself and more about the character actually just sort of being in the air. By clearly defining the ordinary versus extraordinary, we were pretty sure that we'll be able to strike both the bold and balanced demonstration at the heart of the pillar.
The bold and the balanced is my favorite daytime soap opera.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Did you watch it this week?
No.
I got a
no
DVD.
spoilers.
Oh, okay. We got
All right,
you.
good.
With that in mind, then, jumping in Agents of Mayhem is the definition of our extraordinary style and what we use to establish it pretty early on. So this is a jump test that I did way early on to show how jumping in our game could look and feel a bit different than, say, a traditional jump. Fortune was the first character that I knew I was going to be working on, and this model was one of our early test female meshes while they were trying to figure out character style. We knew we wanted to have multiple jumps and air dashing, and this was an attempt to show sort of how they could all sort of look together. When everyone on the team responded well to it, breaking it down became a lot more important to make sure everyone on the animation team and design team and tech team could match the style and intent. And so that we would know where we could tweak the timing and elements once it got into the game. So to break it down, we'll start with that very first jump, which is, in fact, Fortune's base jump in the game. I really didn't have to change a whole lot. It was pretty cool. Notice the simple line of action on that first stretch pose that she makes. It's also worthwhile to note that she has absolutely no anticipation on her jump. It's just instantly up into the air. As she begins to blend into the top of the arc, she begins to hit her personality pose here, which has her legs sort of crossing off to the side. That isn't, of course, mechanically true for a pose that you would have when you're hitting a jump, but it does speak to her more fun, freewheeling nature that we established in her character one sheet. Remember, we always want to be asking, how does this character specifically look when they're in the air? It needs to look silly if anyone else tries it. As she squashes at the top of her jump, the core of the air pose is still held, and it's the follow-through of her limbs that sort of helps to keep the momentum alive. As Fortune begins to then release into the descent, we have the legs drop first. This helps to give a sensation of gravity pulling them down, but still allows for the feel of the hang time to be believable because of the character's core strength to be able to stay in the air. Notice also that the arms maintain a similar world space, even as they begin to sort of rotate up to help further sell the sense of the hang time. Going through the proper fall pose, again, we have reduced the body to as clean a line of action as possible. One thing that we did change from the original test was that we added a little bit of bent arms, because when they were stretched way above her head, you could see that it was noticeably like interpolating or flashing really badly as they played the Lancettle into the animation. So it actually felt better to leave them like this as opposed to doing the full roller coaster.
Want to give us a demonstration of those arms, Evan?
No, I don't.
I'll do the secondary on your hair.
No.
Okay. I do like your hair.
Thank you.
Examining the space and timing, past though, once you've established posing, is really the second part of breaking down the motion. So for reference, here's the timing breakdown of the 12 frames in, say, a Muybridge jump here. It shows how many frames make up each part of the action across the rising, hanging in the air, and then dropping portions of it. And here are the 27 frames of Fortune's jump for comparison. You can easily compare her spacing and timing in relation to a more standard jump. But what this then means in game is we've got to make some sort of curve, which Isaac can speak to.
Yeah, so this pretty much meant that instead of having a standard parabolic curve that like a human would be able to pull off, we wanted to go with more of a plateau style on most of the jumps. So you have to get up into the air faster, you have to hang there longer, and then drop down afterwards. So this timing helps to sell the style of having the in-air pose instead of a standard jump.
Yeah, and this is key because the benefit of bringing jumps into this style is that it allows us to use the same jump animation for standing in place versus running, which is possible because mechanical function isn't what's important in these cases. It's the feel and the personality which is important, and this approach accomplishes that in spades.
Yep. So after implementing this in game and doing a little bit of tweaking, it was really easy.
Making
Didn't
a
take
non-parabolic curve is easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was simple.
And look at it right there. You just drew
Done.
it.
Yeah.
I mean,
So this is what it looks like once it gets into game. We have the curve on the top represents Fortune's standard jump. The one on the bottom is her double and triple jump. They both use roughly the same curve. So you can see the rise and the hang remain pretty much consistent with the first test. And then there's a drop off that we ended up having to ease out so that the player could better predict where they're going to land.
Yeah, I mean, we make jokes about it now, but I can't remember how many conversations we had about trying to like figure out how to make that curve feel good. At what point, like, animation hands off to physics, and like that's always a nightmare scenario.
Right. And it's a mixture of letting the physics system handle the horizontal movement in air, and then the animation driving the vertical, and combining those two, and then eventually handing off to physics.
Yeah, and trying to make sure that it feels consistent across all the characters. It's fun.
Right. So this is what it looks like in game. This is Fortune's triple jump sequence.
And because the triple jumps are considered part of the extraordinary style, it means that with each jump, we can push the pose and personality further and further with each part of the chain, like you might do with an attack combo in a fighting game. And how far we should push that chain goes back to how showy the character is on their one sheet. We bring it all back.
whoa.
We loop it.
Did you guys have to learn a lot of algebra stuff to pull those graphs off?
Yeah, man. That's
A lot of graphing. Did
Yeah.
you use your TI-80?
Nine?
or whatever?
dude. Yeah,
89, dude.
yeah.
89.
89.
Can you play Doom on
Kids
that?
in your 89s.
89's advanced.
Play Doom on anything.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anything. So with
85 or
your,
bust.
since we'd established early on with design and writing and everyone that Fortune was much more of a showy personality, it's totally within her character to do flips and spins and splits in the air and all manners of flourish to her movement and poses. And we've got that buy-in early on as to who she is, which is great. All right, so the next part of style is we knew we'd be using mocap as a base for much of the character's animation suite as part of their ordinary actions, but we also wanted to see if we could use it as base for some of the more extraordinary actions like melee attacks and special abilities. So let's break down how we took Fortune's melee attack from a mocap action into a stylized action. So here's the raw mocap we get back after we have a mocap shoot. And it's great. Like it's a nice solid spin kick from our actress Maggie McDonald. There's no way I would ever be able to do one of these things, and it gives us a really great foundation early on for the mechanics of what it needs to look like. Rob, I've seen pull this off before.
Yeah, I
mean-
actually thought this was Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet Isaac could do that pretty well.
All right, spin kick off.
I would
Let's definitely do this live on
We're just
stream.
gonna break
in this
everything
room.
in the.
We'll have to move the couch out. It's kind of hard to squeeze it through the door, but I mean, it's going to be worth it.
It'll be
for the
fine.
spin kick.
We'll get the whole studio. We'll just do a stream where it's just people coming in doing a spin
One
kick
by
and then
one, doing a
leaving.
spin kick in front of the camera and
Yeah.
then just leaving and
Yeah.
saying nothing.
I would legitimately try it if there was
I would try
space.
it. I would get halfway around.
I'm not even
the
kidding,
corner
that's
is what would
fine.
actually happen.
So then here's how we'd clean it up if this was just going to be an ordinary move. It's speed up about twice overall, but that's not a universal scale, right? It's in specific points that we speed it up. Attention was paid to proper spacing and timing to sell the believability of the motion while still hitting the design needs like it needs to hit on frame 8, stuff like that. And then it was also made to start and stop without moving off origin so that if you did a kick, you wouldn't wind off in some weird direction. But then here it is once we do an additional style pass. Adjusting the timing has shaved off another 7 frames of the motion overall, but much of the style actually comes in the posing and timing before the point of contact on frame 8, so we're going to break that down specifically. So we're going to start with the character, again, in a stretch pose just like the jump. We want that instant responsiveness and that instant pop-up. The height of the in-air motion has been lifted to give it more hang time and anticipation. That right leg, I mean, it's dragging immediately. It's already broken off the hip. It's one of those things. If we look at it like this, people are like, "Why did you break the character? That animation is wrong." But intentional. Here we break it even more, right? The body sort of largely hits there held in air pose, sort of like they would with the jump, and that leg just continues to hang back there, so that we can make sure we're getting that most amount of drag for the pop that starts to happen. You want that nice snappiness. So as the body remains in the air in that held pose, that's when the leg then finally starts to whip around and sort of catch up with all the force of the body that's being used to drive that action of that leg. So when you watch it again, hopefully you can feel that extra attention that's spent on the anticipation so that it feels more snappy and exciting and sort of in personality and style with her. So then, once you've established the style and how you're using mocap, animators want to see how you can push it. And when it comes to style, we're always going to be wanting to know how we can push it past posing and timing and stuff like that. Which leads then, of course, to the idea of squash and stretch. No conversation about animation style can really happen amongst animators before it's going to be brought up. But this was something we really needed to figure out early on and define how to use. Luckily, Motion Builder, even though we don't have custom rigs, right? Like you're using Motion Builder's Human IK rig, it limits some of how we can do. But you can do some squash and stretch in Motion Builder.
Yeah.
Yeah, the day you showed me that, I was like, yeah,
was
this
good
is
day.
great. But even though we can do it, since mocap is used in a large part of our movement suite, you need to be careful how far you push it so that it doesn't feel like all of a sudden we're super zany and stretchy, squashy, and everything else isn't, and then you start to feel like there's this real gap between believability. So like our overall style, we needed to be really purposeful and not arbitrary in how we were going to use it. So this is the first time we did, and this is with Fortune's Dash Left. You can see some squash and stretch built into her spine, but it's really meant to carry the energy of the motion through the spine more than it is to make it like super snappy or over the top, right? You should feel it more than see it. Like if it's not pointed out to you that we've got that squash and stretch going on there, you should never even really notice it. And it isn't meant to be used on everything that's being brought into style, only when it's needed to help keep the pose or the energy alive. It's really posing and timing that are still at the core of our style, and this really just helps to serve and support them as needed. All right, so before we move on to the next section, who's got any questions about style stuff?
Looks like we might have one question here. Singapore asks, did they put mocap suits on strippers to animate strippers in Saints Row?
No, they did put one on Zach Lowry.
They did. So one of the previous animators, the animation lead on 3 and 4, I know suited up to do his best stripper. No, I mean when we like there are mocap actors that are like they're trained for this stuff. Like it's knowing how to act for games is different than film, different than stage, and it's really important that you build these great relationships. The mocap actors we use are fantastic, and we can ask them to do just about anything, and they're going to do it, and they're going to hit it well, and it's great. I love our actors. Shout out to all of them.
Here's another good one.
Yeah.
Toasty Madao in the chat asks, did the voice actor have any effect in how you may have stylized some of the animations for the agents?
When we were animating like something with their VO, you definitely use the VO. Like when we're either animating it or in the mocap space shooting it, you're using it as reference to try and get that. Sometimes like we're animating stuff before all the VO comes in, so it's kind of a back and forth. You hear somebody like, oh, now that I hear their voices like this, I kind of want to build some of that into my fidgets, and some of that stuff sort of happens organically.
DMK Mr. Wong was asking, do you do mocap in-house or is it at a different studio?
We use a place in LA. That's where pretty much all our actors are. We have one actor. Shout out to A-Ray that is between Kentucky and Louisiana, and we bring him out. We've been using him since I think SR2, maybe it was SR1. So we go out there whenever we do shoots, and in-house we just do the keyframe stuff.
All right. I think we actually have one more question before we move on here. This is kind of I feel like this has been addressed before, but 11Z's in the chat asks, how do you attach Oh, excuse me, that's the wrong one. That goes back to the strippers attaching. How do you attach the markers if the actor has no clothes on?
Tape.
The markers you can paint on,
That's
can't
such a
you?
good question, though.
No, I mean they do have like reflective, like like essentially like paint or something you could use. But
Yeah.
we always have people in suits, right? Like it's
Always.
That'd be awesome.
it's
These actors are talented and they can actually act like they have no clothes on, even when they do.
It's amazing.
Like, yeah, that's a skill.
yeah.
All right.
All right, sweet. All right, so moving on then. We can now finally start to define the overall quality of the animation itself and dig into some more specifics of how they'll start moving. Now that we know about the characters and the style. So let's start digging into this. So to do this, knew we were going to have two rules. First, we agreed that out of combat needed to have higher quality visuals versus in combat. And this was because when you're out of combat, as the player, you're going to be more focused on the avatar, the player character in front of you. But when you're in combat, you're usually going to be more focused on what's happening in front of the reticle and less about your player character as they become more of a supporting element in the scene. Second, we wanted to start with on-ground movement, since that's really something that's common in just about every game, and it's got a lot of expectations in regards to fluidity and responsiveness. So starting this out, Isaac and I started to bang on this early on, and Isaac, you want to walk them through sort of what our process was?
Yeah, so we started with the bare minimum here with our stand walk, run, sprint blends. We didn't have hardly any transitions in most of this stuff. And it works, but it's not great. It allowed us to identify the exact areas where we wanted to target visual improvement. So since we worked together on this, we were just going to show what we came up with.
Yeah.
So what we came up with was basically like jamming in transitions everywhere, right? So in between the state blends. So we've got 4 directional jog starts, the 2 180s, jog turns for the left and right, the walk, jog, sprint stops, additive leans, additive head looks, torso twisting and counter twisting. So all of this allowed us to create a standard to define gameplay metrics and markup. We did this all with Fortune initially, and then that let us create like a universal standard that all of the different characters could use across all the agents.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was also great too is once we sort of had this before and after, this kind of became a cool hiring technique where we could have somebody look at the before and then we'd have them look at the after and we'd say, can you see what we've added, right? Because when we're looking for animators, it's not just, hey, can you make a cool animation? It's, can you sort of see the overall system? Can you see how these things play together? And it was really cool for them to look at it and be like, okay, I see these transitions, and then they look and be like, wait, are you doing some sort of additive lean and like additive head looks? And it was like, all right, cool, you got this. Yeah, it was really cool. So by establishing all those metrics on Fortune, it meant that selling weight and speed was going to be entirely aesthetic, like with Hardtack here. And since she's one of our smallest and most agile characters, Hardtack was my second character, which was great because since he's one of our largest, it allowed us to prove out really early that the metrics we defined with Fortune could still work for characters of absolutely any size. And what's become one of my favorite parts of feedback during internal and external playtests is that Fortune is just every single time called out as being faster and more agile than Hardtack, even though under the hood they are at 100% the exact same metric.
Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Like there's still like even other devs that'll come up and be like, yeah, like Hardtack was just moving so slow, so I switched to Fortune. I'm like, they're the same. They're exactly the same. But it's cool. It was great to see that come through. And then another example of meeting metrics but selling the weight just through animation was with jumping. Unlike Fortune's base jump, which had no squash, if you remember at the beginning, it was just her popping straight up. For larger characters, we actually do have 3 whole frames of squash, which is 1/10 of a second, right? Whoa. But that's huge. Like in game animation terms, like 3 frames is like a lifetime.
Dang.
It is, man. So even though we squash him, though, he still hits the same height metric, and he has the same overall time in air. But it's those 3 frames at the front, they help to elicit the same feedback from playtests that Fortune, again, feels more agile jumping and more capable when she's in movement, even though, again, like, they can both hit the same spots, traverse the same parts of the world with equal skill. And that was really important because we want to make sure that, like, as you were swapping, it didn't just all of a sudden, like, feel like, oh crap, this character feels worse when I'm trying to move, right? We wanted to make sure that felt good every single time.
Hey, you know what's really cool about that last slide? The jump lands, when you land and stuff, it looks really fluid and smooth.
Whoa, are you calling out like?
How does that work?
Oh,
Foreshadowing.
Animated, right?
whoa.
Was that?
Getting ahead of ourselves, man.
I'm just so excited. I'm
keep
curious.
it down.
Plus, look at that.
This is totally 100% conversational.
Keep it down, ponytail.
Look at that non-parabolic jump.
All right, so all of this leads me to one of my favorite mindsets that we had on our animation team, which was solve it with universal systems. With multiple player characters, the number of unique assets we could support per suite was going to be limited. So the more common AAA approach of throwing lots of animations into a unique suite for each system just wasn't going to be possible. Even though we had a lot more support and people on this team than previous games, it still doesn't compare to a lot of other studios that have like 2-3 amounts of people, right? So
just watch credits sometimes.
Just watch credits, right. It's crazy. So the first big test for us of how we were going to do that was with stand turns. Oh my heavens. Like
How do you do that?
Nobody pays attention to the stuff except animators, right? But out-of-combat stand turns are one of the deepest, darkest holes you can try and fill with animations for just ever, right? Like slow turns, fast turns, upper body versus lower body, out of combat, like making sure that the feet are locked down or versus like some slight translation. We really wanted to see here that can we do something smart with our system so that we don't have to throw a ton of animations into this thing? Can we use sort of what we got and see what happens? And you know what? It actually worked out pretty well. What we did is we decided we could use walk stops. And then we sort of let this system handle the rest. See, when you deflect the stick, what you're getting are a couple frames of the additive head look and torso look, as well as the beginning of the jog start. So the character has at least some facing in their body. And if we author the walk stop to have some additional foot shuffles back into place when they settle, it helps to sell the momentum of the turn overall. So sure, right? Like this isn't going to be as crazy like feet in place as like a huge turn system with like hundreds of assets. But what this is it's smart and it's responsive with how we do our stuff. And as a general rule, what we found is that if there are kind of a couple of maybe less than perfect frames when you have input on the controller, as long as the general follow through looks good, people are going to be okay with it, and it's going to feel good and still look pretty good. So then our next test with this was going to be vehicle entries, which again are another huge investment in animations once you take into account multiple vehicle types, needed entries from different angles and different versions. Maybe they already have drivers or passengers inside. What can be a giant suite and investment for even one character across multiple characters would be just like scope crushing, and Rob would go cry in a corner.
I do that. Just daily.
But we were going to make him cry in the corner for other things, as you'll see, so we needed to save him here. So for us, when realistic functionality just becomes too much, it's time to really lean into the style and tone of the game. So for this task, we had 2 animators who are Josh Behrens and Nick Niebling, and they looted the way for us. I think it's looted.
They got lit up.
They got lit up. All right, so teleporting and swapping characters is just a core part of the gameplay and tech that Mayhem uses. So using it as an opportunity for vehicle entries just made a lot of sense. So Josh sort of did the first prototype and implementation of it. And then with the addition of giving Hollywood sort of finger guns right there as he cheeses to the camera, Nick added that extra bit of personality that just made the feature fully embrace the style and tone of the game itself. At which point these have now sort of become a lot more of the signature animations for characters, and we sort of, once we started, continued to try and like one up how they play to the camera. I really like the favorite one that I did was Braddock's. Red Cards is great.
Oh man, red
Yeah,
cards.
red cards
That's
is.
That's probably my
fantastic.
favorite.
I don't know if we put that one in a trailer yet, but I love red cards so
Or
much.
KP.
Kingpins, yeah, we showed Kingpins in the trailer. They just get ridiculous and fun, and when you can find those moments to just like go all out, it just really pays off.
Yeah, these are some of the most rewarding animations in the game.
Yeah, and it's like getting into a car, which most times you're just like, let me get in to drive, and here you're like, yeah, I got into that car.
Yeah, we have some experience with the frustration of getting into
Yeah,
cars.
Yeah.
yeah.
See?
Earlier Saints Row games, like we did everything we could to avoid teleporting into vehicles, but it still happens sometimes. So on this game, it was just like a really elegant solution
Yeah.
to just embrace the teleport.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So then the other place that we really couldn't afford any additional crazy amount of assets was turn fidelity while you're running. Designers and world builders they wanted more narrow in areas that you could move, and like when you saw in the before and after quality stuff, it was just a wide open space, so like that really wasn't something we were thinking about at the time. So what could we come up with that would sort of help give us the ability to run down narrow but still look good in open, wide place? And we couldn't just throw a bunch of different animations or assets, but luckily we got this guy. He came up with a solution. So I'm gonna hand you the magic keyboard.
I don't know how to use the keyboard.
Walk us
You drive
through.
the keyboard.
Oh, okay, I'll walk you.
Arrow
Okay,
keys, something about arrow
blow
keys.
my fingers. All right, you too.
Oh, not have to rock bloom.
That's
Lucky Snake Eyes. Oh.
Yeah, so trying to think about how to solve this problem. We in most of the games we've worked on here in the last 12 or so years, we do this in combat versus out of combat switch, right? So we kind of looked at that and asked, like, could we add another switch, another mode switch? Arrow key. So when you want responsive controls near ledges and doors, you're likely looking where you want your character to go. You're not looking at the character itself. So, but when you're in wide open spaces, you want the character to look good and feel more fluid and have more gravity behind him. So you can loosen up on the input responsiveness like just a little bit. The solution was to toggle a near wide mode that adjusts the turn speeds, mainly the turn speeds, based on like trying to detect what kind of environment the player is in or what the player wants.
Yeah. When you proposed this, I was like, "What? We can do that? This is crazy."
Maybe. so you when you're standing still, you're in a near area. You're automatically in a near area traversal mode. When you start moving, you're also in near area for a few seconds, and then it times out, and the game starts assuming you're going to be moving for a long time, roughly in the same direction. And near area will kick back in if you get near vertical surfaces that are about hip height or so. If you do rapid opposing stick deflection, it'll kick into near area. Large angle changes that are like over 90 degrees, significantly over 90 degrees and approaching 180 degrees. Because if you want to do like a 180 jog turn or something like that, then we want to kick into near area again. Because we assume you're trying to make a correction and stay roughly where you're at, right? So adding this meant moving down narrow corridors, making tight turns, small adjustments to interact with an object were no longer an issue. And since near wide switch is controlled by anim graphs, we could also manipulate the head, torso, and lean to get back some of the player intent and weight that you would normally lose in this process.
Which was awesome.
So in wide mode, we have the body turn at a slower rate to look more fluid. So we lead with the head and then with the torso. This gives visual responsiveness to the player input and an order of operations to the turn twist. So it doesn't look like the character is turning on a stick, which Mike hates. Like,
So gross.
I can't tell you how many times Mike walks over to my desk holding a pencil and he would like do this. It's like, this is what fortune looks like. Let's not have this.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's what we established in the original quality video here. You can see the order of operations on the head. If you look close, you have the eye. You can see the head turn first, the torso and the body turns as fortune turns.
Yeah.
So to contrast that, in near mode, the body turns at a faster pace to provide input responsiveness that we need in small spaces. We also wanted to get the head to turn quickly to make the character look aware of the player intent. So we snapped the head around pretty fast. But we let the torso counter-rotate to simulate some drag and break up the order of operations between the different body parts. When running in circles, this eventually times out. So like initially you see her do a counter-rotation on the shoulders, and then eventually it catches up. Her shoulders catch up with her body.
I think I also did those motions a lot too. I was like, what I want is like this. So I would just go to it was me turning pencils at his desk and like just twisting kind of weird towards him.
And I asked him if he could get in the mocap suit to show me the data, but he wouldn't do it.
No, because I only shoot mocap nude. What? We established it's a thing now, apparently.
So in game, this is a near area demonstration. This obviously looks a lot twitchier than wide mode, and isn't as fluid or appealing, but it's only triggered when the player needs that kind of twitch movement where fluidity and weight of motion can get in the way. But you can notice here as she's running in circles, her torso drags behind. Being able to break up that order of operations is key in making this look somewhat convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's made a lot. Like when we did a playtest and like you got that working, it went from being like, oh, I feel like I can't get to things to like everyone was like, yeah, this feels good.
Yeah, it's
and
huge.
No longer did people go, animation driven movement is a problem, right? It was like,
Man,
no, it feels
whose
good.
idea was that?
Yeah. Yeah, animation-driven movement versus like physics movement is just like this constant thing that animators and designers always talk about and think about, and like trying to find that balance of like animation-driven movement that looks good versus physics-driven movement, which is like instantaneously responsive, is just like a thing. So that was actually a huge win to be able to get figured out. So
Yeah, we spent a lot of time debating between design and animation, like who's going to win this one?
Yeah.
Are we going to get like quick and twitchy movement, or are we going to get slow and intentional?
And the solution wasn't
Spoilers.
winning. This is like the solution-
Everyone.
Yeah, like that's the thing.
Everyone wins, yeah.
When you sort of like remove that, like it's my way or your way, and it's like, well, what are we trying to solve with yours, and what are we trying to solve with ours, and how do we do that together? Like that's where we always kind of come up with our best stuff, which I love.
And we have both soft and hard shell tacos and call it a day.
Yeah, done. All right, so another big animation asset sync that happens is combat aim movement. So even though that we'd early on called out that we were not going to focus as much on combat movement as we were out of combat, one area that we really wanted to address was legs that sort of crash through each other when they cross from like front moving versus like back pedaling stuff. I can't even do it with my fingers. I'm pedaling stupid with my fingers.
Interview question right there.
Can
Backpedal with
can
your
you
fingers.
backpedal with your fingers?
Nope.
You're out. But previously, what you guys had done here as well was that you had 8 animations per speed, and this would really add up across multiple characters. And I think you did this most recently on the Saints Row games, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So luckily,
Whoa.
we had one of our senior animators, Clay Matthews, doing his best cat impersonation. He, if anyone wants to like send care packages of like cat cookies or cat cookies a thing to Volition with Clay's name on it, he'd love it.
Why would Clay
Love it.
wear such a horrible t-shirt?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Why did everyone wear such
I would
short
wear that
shorts?
every day. That's not even a bad shirt. That's like an amazing shirt.
Which is
Let's be
why
real
he
right now.
didn't win.
Which is
Be
like
real right now, yeah. I don't think he got a single vote. That was the cutest. That was the cutest
Yeah.
shirt available.
spoilers. There's going to be even more of these terrible T-shirts as we go on.
What?
Rob, you want to walk us through? So, what was the previous approach here that you guys used to do at the studio for SR?
All right, so with the previous approach, we'd start out with the 4 cardinal directions. You go forward, you go to the right, left, back. We'd sometimes have some diagonals to cover the transitions between going front and back. I think as we went along, we added more and more of those. There was this funky back pedal switch where you'd go from backpedaling if you were facing front, and then there'd be a timer that'd be running, and that would switch you over if you stayed running backwards long enough. We did need to do like horizontal correction in terms of getting the gun to point in the right direction.
And it never broke.
No, never. It always worked perfectly.
Yeah.
But with continually adding more and more animations, the scope for this got large. It didn't look very good compared to our competition.
Yeah.
And we knew that the competition was achieving that by adding even more assets than we were, and obviously that goes way against what we were trying to do. So the Clayton Quintopoulos Matthews, the third method. Yeah.
Is that his full name?
Yes.
It's definitely his real name.
Check his birth certificate.
He actually pulled this off with only 6 animations.
Yeah, and this doesn't require any of that horizontal IK.
Right. It points in the right direction on its own.
Yeah.
It's technically simpler, and it looks a lot better.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, so we'll break down how this works, right? Instead of doing those 4 cardinal directions, we decided that we'd capture back left and front right as sort of single assets, and then we have crossover angles of front left and back right. Essentially then we use like the 3 sort of front facing pedaling ones in one blend tree, the 3 back in another. We put a state machine above that, which switches between those 2 as driven by the stick deflection on the angle, right? So there's about a 10-degree overlap on those angles that switch between the forward and the back, so that if you were to like hang out in one of those regions, and sometimes you would notice before there'd be like these weird little stutters or bounces that would happen. So we wanted to get rid of that. So before we actually, trying to do any more, like, we'll just look at what these individual animations look like before we show it off in game, because I think seeing them sort of explains what we're doing here better than a circle graph. So this is what we consider our forward run animation for combat, which, as you can see, the character is running 45 degrees forward to the right, while still sort of aiming to the front, and the arrow at the bottom is the camera relative orientation there. You can see the gait is like just a straightforward jog, right?
Yeah, it was confusing for a while.
Yeah, it's a little confusing to think of your forward as like...
But Mike, he's not running forward.
But he's not. Which, if we were smart, we would have just called it like forward 45 instead of forward, but like we did so many iterations and rewriting name files that it got gross.
Clay's smart, he's not that smart.
So here we have our forward right, which is 135 degrees to the right. But more than being that forward gait you saw before, this is actually more of a sidestep, where the left leg is crossing in front of the right leg. And again, the character's facing towards the camera, the reticle camera orientation. Now here's what we would consider our back right, which actually looks like a back right. Again, it's at the 135 degrees to the right. It's a sidestep motion again, but this time it's the right leg that's crossing in front of the left leg. The back run is that back pedal that I just couldn't figure out with my fingers. So that's pretty straightforward, but it's at 135 degrees to the left. Everyone try it. If you can do it on the stream, send me a picture.
Just gonna do that for
That is hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah.
Turn your left leg in a counterclockwise circle.
So here's the back left, which is another side step, 45 degrees left this time. Here the left leg is crossing the right leg. And then the forward left, same angle, now it's the right foot crosses in front of the left, right? So kind of readjust your brain into thinking that as the 6 instead of like this. We just like tipped it on its side a bit. All right, here's what they look like all in action. So this is 6 animations for the jog, and then we also created another 6 for walks so that you could blend between them at any speed. And that gives us all of our combat movement for a character. It takes a little getting used to, especially when like we were trying to direct the mocap actors, and like it took a few times to figure out, especially in like when you're authoring the animations. But once you wrap your head around it, you get everything you needed, and it's entirely animation and pose driven. So again, like we don't need to do any like IK aiming for the horizontal. Like the character just stays locked onto the reticle that whole time, which is huge. So it's less animations than what we previously used. I know, like when I was investigating some of the stuff early on with Clay, other places were using like 12 per speed, and we cut it in half.
Yep, it blends a lot better.
Yeah, it blends great. You don't get those legs crashing through. It's awesome.
Technically, it's easier to implement. It's less buggy.
Yeah.
And even though we're not showing the feet here, it's not like we're hiding it. You know, the feet actually blend very well. That's good.
Yeah, it's really cool. If you were to in game, if you want to check, you can like look straight down at their feet.
Do it.
And you'll be able to see like they're on there too. It's awesome. All right, so any more questions about defining the quality with all that stuff we just talked about?
We had one question saying, are you guys, it's a little too far away from me.
Using blend paces for loco or anim states with transitions. Let's see, what's a blend pace?
Blend space.
Blend space.
space.
Okay. Loco, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean. Or anim states with transition. I'm not exactly sure what you're specifically asking, but these would be the right people to ask.
Yeah.
I would say yes.
We do use I don't know if it's really hitting on the question, but all of the states, like looping animations that we're playing, so like all the directional runs, they all subscribe to a cyclic percent. There's one cyclic percent on a character that's spinning all the time, right? And all of the states play to that percent, so you can transition from one state to another at any time, and they'll always line up. A lot of studios use trigger-based matching. We haven't done that yet.
DMK Mr. Wong asking, how do the physics-based animations work, like hair and jewelry? What's the process for adding them? Is that something that you have to tweak separately in engine/code? That sounds like something that would have a big, long answer to it.
That sounds like something I should answer. Ours physics-based animations for jewelry and hair is set up on a per mesh basis or a per character basis, right? Usually it's just defining like a mesh that goes along, like a proxy mesh that goes along with that, like that jewelry or hair's like form factor, and then kind of defining parameters like how heavy is it, how does it move in the wind, and like what is it connected to, really. I don't know how in depth to really go. Like generally, like there isn't like, it's a separate system from the animation system. It's not really connected. Sometimes you can reach in. There are certain characters that have simulation pieces that are driven by animations or certain animations. Yeah,
but it's handled from the technical animator side. Animators technically don't touch it, right? Like we animate the stuff and then they make it look good, so that when like Fortune jumps, you see like her hair and all that stuff sort of have that nice secondary, because secondary is huge on when a character's moving around, getting that nice overlap and stuff.
Yeah, I kept trying to convince everybody to just animate the secondary, but they wouldn't listen.
It's a lot of time. It's so much time. And yeah, physics is great.
Lots of assets.
Lots of assets.
Yeah.
Lots of assets. And we need to make you cry here. So since we're already talking about graphs and tech stuff, like we're just gonna fully indulge, like we're just gonna dive right into the techie stuff.
Oh boy.
let's nerd out.
So beyond evolving the animation graph, improvements and additions that we made, the big gamble for us that we took was going to be on procedural, as inspired in part by David Rosen's animation boot camp talk a few years ago on GDC. Boot tack.
New Age.
Boot tack. Boot tack. That's Hardtack names his boots. Boot tack. His pants are pant tack. His hat, you would think it's hat tack, but it's
cap
not.
tack.
It's cap tack. Yeah.
Tack hat?
Yeah. So, what this meant specifically for us when we say procedural, though, is IK modifiers, which were given to us by right here, Mr. Munchies. So, Rob,
Nice intro.
do it up. Show us
right.
your magic.
All right. Well,
Not just your magic fingers, your actual magic.
okay.
Magic fingers
Yeah.
to yourself.
Well, it all started with jump lands. Jump lands were the really big worry that we had, because if you try to do them with assets, making individual animations, that's a deep dark hole. We're talking like 40 animations per character for standing still, for jogging, for sprinting, and for the first time in Volition's recent games, we were going to allow combat during jumping. So previously we'd not do that, but now we had to worry about, well, now you're holding your gun, and those 6 animations we just talked about were, we made it down to 6, but that would still be 6. These are also extremely boring animations to do. They are tedious. You're just doing, I need to make it look like I landed. But now I have to do that for every possible permutation of landing. So that means they're also really difficult to update. If you wanted to make a change to a run after you had made those lands, you basically wouldn't do that.
Yep.
You would just say, nope, we're sticking with what we got.
Yep.
So we had a couple of choices here. We could either try to sort of cheat by reusing animations in situations where they weren't intended, kind of like the
The walk stop.
walk stop before. That worked out great, but this wasn't gonna gonna do it, you would definitely see some quality, some feet sliding, some stuff, or we had to introduce a system. Guess which way we went?
Well, since jumping is a huge part of our game.
Whoa! I think we introduced a system. All right, so here is the finished product. You saw this before, but now let's focus on the landing. So when Hardtack here lands, oh, and now it switches on me. The body and head are procedural. So those are not animated. The arms are animated, so there's an arm override, and then just during that little procedural bounce there, we're blending from the falling animation to the standing animation. So that's what it looks like. So here it is running. It's the same thing. The head and the body are procedural stuff is all the same. The arm animation is actually the same. We do change the blends a little bit, so it's a little out earlier. And this also works pretty much the same for combat, except we don't do the arms in that case because the guns obviously got to be pointing in the right direction. So total bonus with combat. When we put this in, one of the designers came up to me and he said, "This totally solves responsiveness on the ground." We weren't even aiming for that. We were aiming to remove extraneous work off of the animators. But he said, because you are leveraging exactly the same responsiveness that Isaac worked so hard on earlier, when you're on the ground, you can transition from running to stopping to taking off to sprinting, all with the same responsiveness, because this isn't an animation that's blocking it up. So that's that. How does it work?
How does it work, Rob?
Magnets.
All right.
Okay.
Stream over. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Just take a magnet to your computer, and it's gonna totally.
Just rub it.
All your games will be more responsive. I
Yeah,
promise.
make sure to buy one of those industrial strength ones.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for
it-
sure.
It can't be shipped in planes because they'll
No.
crash.
Yeah. The stronger the magnet, the more responsive your computer.
Just need that right
Disclaimer,
into your.
don't put magnets by your computer.
Yes. Do not do this.
Don't do
What are
that.
you guys talking about? I do that every night.
Yeah.
Just relax it a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
Iron out
So
the creases.
we ended up going with these defined uses defined curves.
Yeah.
These were animator defined. So, but in we defined them in Motion Builder. They'd sort of give a general feel for the land. So you have here on the screen a light, a medium, and a heavy land. And the light land has a little bit shorter of that main bounce, but it's got a secondary bounce that's a lot higher. You'll see that with Fortune's land. She gets that sort of double bounce. It feels nice and light. Medium is, your Hollywood. He's just sort of standard. Heavy land, we've extended sort of the length or the intensity on the initial bounce, so it feels more like he's hitting the ground. And so that stuff, these are all sort of defined on a 0 to 1 scale, so that they're just there and used for pretty much everybody. I think we only had maybe 4 or 5 total in the game. It's totally, that's it.
Yep.
So next we go into the tools and we figure out how is this going to be triggered. Obviously for jump lands, we care about when you reach the ground. So we can send in our own control parameters, the same things we use to drive the graphs, as the thing here. Although to be honest, for jump lands, because we're involving physics and prediction and all that jazz, there's a little extra code magic. But it's mainly like, is this guy on the ground now? Oh, great, he's on the ground. And then we can also set up these global settings for determining the scale, scaling the length and the output of the function curve. So you can make that same curve function take longer or shorter, and you can make the overall stuff more or less intense. Then the next part is setting up these individual operations, and basically you need to figure out what does the operation do. You can do like translation, so just move it in space. The hips would go down. You can do some rotation. How much? There's an offset defined. You know how much do you translate or rotate. You need to find where the space and the axis around which you want to do these things, and then determine for how long. You can change the scale again of the function, and you can also add delays, and that helps us do sort of like you'll see that they don't all happen at the same time. That there's the hips will go first, and then the spine stuff will follow.
And you'll notice too, like we're setting it on per bone, per axis, right? So like there, we're saying it's the hips in Y, and then we're saying it to translate, right? So animating these things,
whatever.
As we're about to show, I loved it. Like at a certain point, it becomes this Zen-like thing where it's like, this is what animation looks like in 2017, right? Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, I just look at it and I see blonde, brunette. All right, so here is the jump land with
It's making me sick.
with nothing, and as you can tell, Hardtack's leg should be completely broken.
It's just making you sick.
I feel ill right now.
You feel physically ill because there's no reaction on a land.
Yeah, I can't deal with this.
Yeah. Okay, so nothing happens. We're just blending between the animations. The arms are going there. You can see them in
that
isolation. Little wiggle on the arms. Make it wiggle just a little. All right, so here we're going to add just the Y down translation in the hips. And so you can see he's just sort of squatting in place, but it already adds like a significant, it no longer feels broken.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a little IK obviously on the feet to keep them on the ground. You don't want them, going through the ground.
Yeah.
Okay, so now a little X rotation on the spine with that delay we talked about earlier. And I think this is the time where Mike is going to talk about how making live update work in your tools is important.
Just do it.
So have live update.
Like, here's the thing, right? What's important with live update is, since that's a number thing that, like, animators, like, I don't see blonde and brunette. I just see, like, why can't I, like, grab the character and move them, right? So when I have to, like, type in a number, right? Like, what is the Y offset on the hips for translation? Is it 0.1? Is it 203?
It's definitely 203.
I don't know, right?
So it's metric system, so you can't know.
I have no idea. But it's one of those things that was like, all right, let me start with like 1. And then you would see the character like fly away through the ground. And you're like, not what we wanted. Let me put it to 0.1. And because I can just save it and it just instantly live updates in game, that's the only way this was able to be done to any degree of speed or quality, because otherwise if you had to shut down and open every time, you'd forget what the last one looked like. In this mess.
Do you remember the very first version of this where I actually tried to use like spring equations to make this work?
Yeah.
And then I handed that to you and said, please fill out these arbitrary numbers and make it look like how you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work.
I was like, I don't know, I'm just going to start punching in extremes. And it worked great.
It was totally why we went with that long term.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here's the finished again. Total of 15 operations. Obviously, the first one took some doing. A lot of that tweaking. But once you have it, you can just take that and apply it to somebody else. And you will probably have to make a copy of it and tweak some of the stuff. But we basically had a few templates for the different sizes of agents, and they got used all over the place for everybody.
Yeah, essentially like those curves, right? Like we had the heavy curve and the light land and stuff like that. We just had modifiers that had all those, right? So you would just choose your character and be like, yeah, I think Fortune would be a light land. And then you'd look at like, I think Braddock would be like a heavier land because we want her to feel really tough. You can just choose and put them on there and see how it looks and then make adjustments. It was great.
Yeah, one of the really cool parts about this is we can do like a jump land stand, and then you can transition into a jump land run, or vice versa, and it just works. Like there's no animation blending to deal with and try to make it look nice. It just works and it looks good.
Yeah, and as opposed to, like you said, like previous places I've worked on previous games, like 40 animations. Like I remember spending like a week or two just going like, oh, I have to just do nothing but jump lands for the next like 2 weeks, and this is gonna suck. And so when this was proposed, and it was like, Rob's like, yeah, I think I got this, and he put it in there, like, whew. I just rolled on the ground like crying tears of happiness.
Yeah, we definitely want you guys to be able to focus on the animations that give that personality, and jump lands are not that.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Oh, except
segue. That's what's totally natural. We're gonna ruin it by me saying that was a natural segue. That was not intended. We do actually though use animations for long fall lands, right? There are times where animating a land is fun. It's usually when you can hold them in place, or like if they don't have like a weapon in their hand. If maybe you've got like a game where it's just all about like running around traversing without combat, and you like see them land and like touch the ground like Last Guardian's land animations. Love them. But here, since we don't take fall damage on agents, we do lock them in place for a little bit, which is the perfect time to, again, like add personality to the character. So Hollywood hits, like his namesake, like hits that 3-point landing you see in every movie. He's the only agent that hits a like 3-point landing like that. He's the traditional one. That was like something I was like, everyone else come up with something different. Like, let's not do the 3-point landing all the time.
Sorry, magic fingers.
Yeah.
Didn't do their stuff.
It's all right.
So the next question is, what else can we do? You know, one of the things was you can say when you're on the ground, that's when we want to trigger one of these things. But what if it wasn't the ground? What if it was when you started a sprint? And here's an example of that. If you're just blending into a sprint, it's kind of boring. It's serviceable. You know, it's fine. But you wanted a little something extra. We wanted it to feel like you're sort of doing a push-off without sacrificing any of the responsiveness that we've come to know and love.
Yeah.
So that'll be a common thread. But yeah, just a little nudge to cover that blend, to make it look a little more natural. Again, without spending a lot of time. These things got copied and pasted all over everybody.
Yeah, everyone just uses the same one.
They did this
once we had it, it was just done. Like, we had our transition.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all right.
Before the system went in, we were trying to do a jog to sprint transition without seeing if we could do it without an animation, and we put in the I think it was like the jog start.
Oh yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah,
and the speeds are off, obviously, but we just tried to mask it a little bit. It just didn't work.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Mike, how'd you feel about that?
Yo, man, when you showed me this, literally, I fell madly in love with modifiers. And like they became the Frank's hot sauce of animation tech. Everyone laughs because when somebody says, "Hey, how are we going to do this thing?" my answer is usually, "Can we use modifiers?"
Sure.
It's I just say it all the time, and I'm like honest about 75% of the time. And I think what's great about this too is like so Moeller 47 asked a question, which was why did we choose procedural over using additive animations for the landing? And this is one of those cases, right, where like. When we have this in place, it enables a lot of different things, as you're about to see, by having this procedural as an answer, as opposed to just additive.
I think there are some benefits over additive. Some of it is in the sort of when dealing with it in code. It's kind of helpful to have, these are the things that have been animated separate from like, this is the stuff we're trying to tweak on top. It makes some of that calculation easier. And I won't go into all of that,
Sure.
But it's also like, you know, one of those animations, we were able to reuse the same one for everybody, but they're on different rigs, and that wouldn't have necessarily worked if we went additive, and all that. So, we'll look at the out of combat to combat transition here. The blend to aim it's only a couple of frames, so the modifier actually helps us extend that transition a little bit longer while getting you right into it. So you get there, but you still get a few extra frames, that little bob there again, without screwing with your responsiveness. When people actually go into combat, and it's not just demonstrating it here, they want to be shooting right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and you can contrast this too with, you'll notice when they come out of combat, back into out of combat, we actually do give them a bespoke animation there, right? So we can focus a little bit more on their personality. This also helps to sort of take the focus from the reticle and put it back on the player, which is where we want it to be out of combat, because we're taking so much time to really focus on the personality and feel and look of the character, and we want to draw attention to it.
Yep. All right. So here's a look at combat starts and stops. We had 4 directions for the starts and just 1 stop. Again, little push on top of the blend to just make it a little bit more natural, but not needing assets for every direction. And 1 set worked for everybody.
All characters. Done.
All of them. Weapon fires. This was an interesting one. So we obviously do some IK to aim up and down, but what we were able to do is attach these spring operations, those same functions you saw earlier on the curves, and adjust the IK a little bit with them. We also do some of the same operations, so you can see like the shoulders moving a little bit there. Hey, there they go.
Yeah, even the hips, like we do.
Yeah,
like hips down and back. Like this is another one animators get in there. And it's like 20 operations later.
My test case was like one thing.
Yeah.
I think I twisted the top spine bone, and I'm like done, and they're like nope. All right, so again, these are. Once you get a couple of these set up, they're easy to duplicate across people and then tweak for the feel of their individual weapons. These are also a lot easier to adjust for timing. Design likes to change things. They like to change weapon fire rates. They like to do all of that. And all we have to do is go in and tweak those timing values, and they're ready to go. And this worked well enough that we were able to use this for almost every main agent. There are only a couple of them, and they're actually who use fire animations, and they're actually important to their weapon and the way that it works.
Yeah, it's like a hardtack.
Hardtack
with like his coming shotgun in Rama shooting a bow, right? Like
yeah. No, bad Isaac. All right, so we can also apply this to hit reactions. Everybody's favorite thing in games are when you get hit by weapon fire and you have to flinch for a while and it takes away your control, right? No. Everyone agree with that?
Yeah, it's the best thing ever.
Yeah, no, people hate that. So we wanted to be able to add a little bit of reactiveness when people are hit without always having to resort to that. Obviously, there are some full body ones on the enemies. You'll see a full flinch, but these ones can work whether you're crouching, standing, walking, running, all of that. So they're just getting applied without losing control.
So then Rob got really crazy and let us start to add scaling, not just translation and rotation to the bones with modifiers. So at this point, I ripped out the animations that we were using for swap and just sort of added this like procedural squash and stretch. You can see it really well in hardtack, where he like bloop. If the VFX wasn't there, they turn into nightmare fuel of just like long-legged, stringy, like kill me now things that I got a few bugs about that I was like, no, that's as intended. as designed. Yeah, that stuff was fun. I love the scale. But then we can get really crazy with it. And we can just then essentially add procedural squash and stretch to everything, right? So like here's the Cabots that you saw in last week's Gremlin Tech stream, the Cabot gun. There's no like traditional like real animation on them, right? That's just like a physics thing that's bouncing with like this procedural squash and stretch. But it's just enough to be like it's cute and cuddly and gummy feeling, as opposed to just like this hard like statue that comes at you, and it just adds that extra little bit of goofiness and personality that I really love.
And now you know.
Yeah.
It's all magic.
Magic. So, any questions about tech stuff?
Yeah, we already took the one, but if there were, do we see anything else, or we just keep trucking?
Are you talking about the one in the chat window?
Yes.
Here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it for questions right now. Though.
All right, so then
I
we're going to
explained
move
it
on.
perfectly.
You nailed it. Man.
Yes.
Yeah, he made a system that I could use, so he had to do it really, really well. All right, so then let's finally, the last big hurdle that we needed to sort of jump was going to be facial animation. As an industry, the tech solutions and the expectations that are out there are just like incredible and staggering and growing all the time. And while we really wanted to make sure we hit a higher quality of facial animation than past games at Volition, we knew that investing in facial capture or lots of like crazy custom hand key animation, just like it wasn't going to be a focus or something that we were going to work on. So, this was another one of those things where like, let's see what we can do to lean into style. What does 2D do that works here that we can maybe replicate? So what this means was focusing on strong, emotive personality expressions, like this iconic Glenn Keane expression sheet that he created for Tangled. Glenn Keane is just like when it comes to animation, like animators just bow before the altar of Glenn Keane. He's
Glenn Keane.
Dude,
Glenn Keane.
don't even joke.
I'm not.
Yeah.
You think I'm joking?
No, so we figured that we would try as best as we could to like hit poses like Glenn Keane with our facial rigs, and then if we could hit those poses strong, then as long as we just sort of animated within those, just kind of kept them alive a little bit, it would work. So specifically, what we decided was expression changes are really what take the most amount of time to sell in facial animation, on both the physicality and like emotionally relatable level. And we knew that we just didn't have the bandwidth or even really the need with where our game camera was for all of that. When it came to gameplay. So it was best for us to think of like making sort of a scrunch face like you see in the top row, the second one in from the left, to sort of be like that transitional smear frame between the actual expressions that we would do, which then also helps to keep it consistent with the rest of our extraordinary style assets, creating that strong personality-driven pose with something really snappy to just carry you through the action was going to be the approach. So for us to be able to do this meant we needed really great facial tools, a really great facial rig, which we got Shubi over here.
No.
The other thing that we realized, though, was that people in general are going to be willing to accept mouths if they aren't necessarily perfect in the game, but really it's those dead eyes and dead expressions that people really kind of comment and sort of lose any sort of empathetic attachment to the character. So we figured if we could nail the eyes and the expression, we'd be okay with letting procedural handle the mouth in game. In cinematics, that's all facial or all keyframe animated. When the camera's right there, we knew that was important. But for just like people talking in the world, we were like, let's make sure the expressions are good. So Evan, you want to walk us through what magic you did with your facial rig and tools?
Yeah, let's
to let
party.
us do this.
All right. So I'm Evan. Sorry, I've been really quiet this stream.
You're eating Oreos.
I was pounding some Oreos earlier, so my sugar high is like
Full
gone.
100 Oreos.
Yeah, full 100 Oreos.
Yeah.
No puking.
No pukes at 66.
So basically, as the slide says, we started with the 7 universal emotions that every human being / character has, right? For example, here's young Hardtack's expression sheet. You made this, right? You did the expression sheet for Hardtack.
Yeah, I made the concept, but yeah, I didn't make those exact expressions.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one question.
Yeah.
Why is Tack crying?
Because he just got dunked on.
Yeah, he did.
So each character, like Hardtack, Fortune, etc., they each have a unique hand-authored pose for each expression, right? So no 2 characters have the same smile or the same surprise. When you actually mix and match them, you can see like the bugs from a few weeks ago, I think, where Fortune had Hardtack's face and her face was all scrunched up, and she had like that
Kind of looked like a froggy face, didn't it?
froggy fresh face.
A fresh froggy face, as it
yeah.
were. Yes. Yes,
and
indeed.
these are usually created with some real life reference. And we also, along with expressions, have each Viseme is created, hand authored. That allows us to leverage procedural animation in game that isn't just like shared amongst all the characters. It leverages actual like, this is what this character's like ooh shape would be, or this character's shape would look like.
So we'd say like, oh, Fortune is more of a happy character. Can we try and build more of sort of just a natural smile into her expressions? Or like Braddock, she's got that cigar in her mouth. So like, how does she talk with a cigar in her mouth, right, all the time?
Yeah. So, and all of these shapes were actually outsourced. All of our external animators have a history of working in film, so a lot of these shapes really sell the personality that like film, like they can focus heavily on just like facial animation. So we got the benefits of that, and our internal animators could actually use these shapes to build the animations or entirely new shapes, as we'll get into later. So here's a quick video of what the interface looks like. That picture of me is not always there. I am working on it though.
Yes.
That is not hard to do. That would be pretty fun to spend a few days on.
I hope that doesn't take you a few days.
I love that you would be like literally and metaphorically like trapped inside the tool that you made.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
It works on so many levels.
That'd be a little real.
Yeah.
So each of the sliders that the video is sliding around are tied to expressions that character has, and they range from going in the negative or going in the positive of that shape's influence. The artist can then bring in procedural lip sync data on top of this and actually start a an entire facial animation using just layers of expressions and visemes. And what's cool to note about this is that you wouldn't know this either if you weren't an animator on AOM, but like very few animations in our game are actually authored with face and full body animation together. The ones that are actually shown right now are the ones that have that. So that includes idles, fidgets, emotes, mayhem abilities, the front vehicle entries as we all know and love. Basically any animation that defines the character or that we've deemed extraordinary, right? But otherwise the faces aren't animated. They're just layered on top of the existing body animation. So when you're just running around the world, an agent has their quote unquote agent expression on, which is the eighth expression that we author, as opposed to 7 universal. In AOM, every agent has 8 universal expressions, which we can see here. This is Dr. Babylon's personality expression, where he kind of looks a little crazy and maniacal, as opposed to the rest of his expressions where he's just giving real human emotion. But you can also see here the difference between Hardtack and Babylon in the same format. But what was also interesting, now that we had all these expressions authored for each character, we could use these general facial, break up the face into certain sections and start creating more expressions based off of that. Kind of like the Scott McCloud approach, where the, let's see what 2 of them were. Anger and fear can make a caged animal, right? If you think about it, like a caged animal would be both angry and scared.
Yeah.
So we can split that by actually saying, hey, maybe we make the top of the mouth or the top of the face, like the eyes, angry, but the mouth is fearful. And that together can actually create, a caged animal.
Yeah, this is like literally how I decide to make every expression during the day. Like I'm going through my day, I think about this.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. Anytime Isaac talks to me, I have to think and sit there for about 45 minutes and respond with the correct facial
It's a
shape.
constant process, I like putting that onto the GPU and doing that.
Rub some magnets on it just to get it really in there.
I do my facial processing on the GPU to determine what combination of emotions to apply.
Okay, so here we go back to Fortune, and we can see her big 3 expressions, along with the top universal ones that we just used. A combination of those and some hand keyed, move this bone over here, move that bone over here, stick the tongue out, etc.
And like the visemes too, right? Like when she's whistling, it was just like, let me take the whoo sound, right? The whoo, and it was like done. Like I've got a whistle face mixed with happy eyes, and like.
I love her facial expressions.
So Isaac, would you love those expressions more if they were like alive?
I wish they were
Because right
alive.
here, they're pretty static.
They're not moving at
Can
all.
they be alive?
Not moving.
These are not authored to be alive either. They're actually authored as just a straight up pose.
Yeah, these
right?
are not animations.
Not
So
animations.
this is not
are-
even animating. Why
No.
is this in here?
Yeah, we should actually just end the stream.
Posing of
We're
mayhem.
gonna put modifiers on it, right?
Close.
Oh.
Almost.
Almost. So how would we bring these to life?
With IK.
With other animations.
Yep.
With IK. We're gonna IK the face. So basically, we have one base living expression animation for a character. So we say, hey, what is this? Like, what makes a character or a person alive? Well, your eyes dart around. Your face kind of just like moves a little bit because you're breathing and you're just, generally anxious. So each character has one living expression authored for them. So we have a smaller group of these living expressions, and I got ahead of myself. The smaller group are people, not the expression animations. The smaller group is our external animators, and we keep them. That makes the animations at a higher quality, and they're consistent. And that means that our internal animators can focus on defining that character, and directing external staff, and balancing that against gameplay needs.
Yeah, because a lot of times, right, like for our game, like facial's a nice thing to have, but you don't need it to be able to play the game, right? So for us, when we're animating something, it's like, well, what do we need for the game itself? And so facial can very quickly like fall in importance. So by being able to have like people that are just focused on it entirely outside of the place, they can take as long as they need to, and then when it comes to us, we can just plug and play.
Yeah. So if we take this animation, right, of Fortune, and we layer on her, I don't know, let's see what we have here. That is her contempt. No, that's
just the normal one.
Okay,
and then
here we
here's
go.
her disgusted.
This is her disgusted. So it just makes her look like she's disgusted and actually alive. But that's just two animations layered, like an animation and then a single pose layered on top of that.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck from just having, like 21 poses made and then one animation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can see it in game, in context. So basically what this all boils down to is that we have a system in our game that design and other systems can use to call expressions on characters and emotions on characters in the game, right? So that means our expressions and our characters actually have emotional game time context to what's happening around them. So if you're running around the world and your agent picks up a shiny new object, then the game, like the character is like, yo, I'm happy because I picked up the object, I picked up the guy. Or they're angry that Legion is around, so they play the angry expression on that character. Or if they're in combat, maybe they're a character that likes being in combat, so they smile. But maybe a character like Rama would be very stern and stoic in combat, because she's fighting for something that she really believes in. So facial animation in our game is also the definition of solving something with a system, and then leveraging that system in as many places as possible.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rad. And I'm supposed to open up now for questions about facial animation.
Looks like we haven't gotten any for facial animation.
And we
Got no questions? Dang.
thought I saw some go by, but
There may have been some earlier, but I wasn't sent any.
yeah.
All right.
Interesting fact. For quite a while, we were debating whether we would need morphs versus bones for facial animation, right?
That is very true.
And it was a little bit stressful, but
That is
the
also very
magicians
true.
over here got it to work with just bones waiting. So
Yeah, our facial system is entirely bone driven. Yeah.
Yeah.
good job.
I see one there. Don Eric 82 asks, do you guys have any other stories like the pencil story where an animator looked ridiculous from the outside, but he was professional on the inside?
The pencil, like the turning pencils.
We are
Oh, like where I was like using the
Yeah.
pencil to.
He
we
might
are-
look better than I do turning the pencil.
We are
I'm
0%
not
funny in our room. We're
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
We're very we're here, we get the job done, we go home.
Yeah.
There's no Jenga.
There's
no
no-
sandwiches.
no push-ups.
There's no
at 3
sandwich
o'clock.
talk. Yeah.
There's no push-ups. There's no
Yeah.
swinging at the swing set at the park across the street. There's none of that. I don't know where you guys keep getting this from.
Yeah. No, pretty much everything.
Yeah, honestly, working in animation, like, you find yourself demonstrating things in the weirdest way. Like, I recall, working on a downed system where I was basically rolling on the floor Mel Gibson style. Like, okay, and we point the gun here, and then, like, you can go this. Yeah, you remember that. And, like, if somebody isn't demonstrating something with their whole body every day, it's, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
It's
or like
a weekend.
Or like the facial stuff. Like we would get those back, and I'd be reviewing at my desk. I've got like a little compact mirror, so I'd be like, "Well, how do I make a ooh sound?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, what's my tongue doing?" And to everyone else, I'm just staring at a compact, like, making ridiculous expressions.
There was a cinematics animator on Saints Row 2 who sat at his desk, and every time he had to do a cutscene, he had this little mirror, and he would act it out in the mirror. And like, I swear, the cutscenes he made in the final game, like, it looks like his face, and it's creepy.
Yeah.
Like, I can pick out his face.
All right, so we're going to break it down real quick before we get to the final questions.
Break it down.
So at this point, right, like we defined the characters, the style, the quality, the tech, what we were doing for facial animation. We were finally at this point able to sort of like extrapolate what the cost of creation was going to be for just one agent. So the initial question of how many are we going to have, how many could we support, we could finally answer it right now. Give me a beat, break it down. Nailed it. There we go. All right, so we ended up just shy of 100 animations per player character, which is pretty crazy when I think about it, because player characters can have way more than that, and
Yeah.
it's nuts.
Yeah, you want productions like how many animation? IDK 100.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
That's it. 100.
That's nuts, right? I mean, granted, now you look at 12 characters, we've got 1,200. 1,200 for one character is about right, maybe, but yeah, that blew my mind when I saw this and we realized it. So this is all of those animations. This was copied from an Excel doc because I personally love to spend as much time animating in Excel as I do Motion Builder or Maya, or in Numbers with IK mods.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, you do excel at animating. That joke was not planned. We came up with that just
Look,
now.
it's still meant just as much right now, though.
That is my
Yeah,
favorite.
It's
joke.
just as much right now. Of note, something that we tracked and defined here is what assets we could actually share from one character to another, which is managed by having all of our characters that the sets live in a hierarchy, right? So like I mentioned earlier, once Fortune was done, every character in the game could essentially then be prototyped by design, because they could just all share Fortune's animations. So like when Hardtack first started, before I gave him new animations, he was running and jumping like Fortune, kicking his legs out to the side and looking absolutely ridiculous, which was great, because then I was like, it looks good on Fortune, it looks terrible on him. Nailed it, right? Like that means you hit the personality the over the pure function. And having those sets that inherit up, I know is a bit of a technical headache on like an architectural level, but it's amazing for us, because then design just isn't blocked. They've got whatever they need moving forward. You can also see here that we call out which ones can be done internally versus which ones can be done externally. Because even things like jog starts, we figured out those metrics and the style and everything and got it so well defined early on, we could pretty easily communicate what our needs were going to be to external studios and keep it relatively in a straightforward manner. When we get those back to implement, oftentimes we still have to do a final polish pass to make sure that they were just right, they looked good in camera, sort of all those little things that you see in game that you don't see when you're animating them in your software package. But what was great about this is it let us focus on those big stylized push stuff first, while the other stuff sort of trickled in as we went. So what we realized is, after leveraging style and sharing and outsourcing and tech, 100% unique characters were estimated to take about 10 weeks internally to create, implement all the animations. Shared characters that would maybe share a weapon hold could save us about 5 weeks, and then we would add an additional 3 weeks of polish and iteration to each character so that we could react to any design changes or feedback from playtests and stuff like that, which we got pretty close to, which was pretty
It
cool.
was pretty damn impressive.
Yeah. So this is what we ended up with in total for the game. We've got the 12 playable characters, as we've shown. We have 10 enemy troopers, different enemy types that you encounter regularly throughout the game. We've got the multiple base agents that we saw last week in the Gremlin tech. We also have multiple unique bosses that I'm sure you'll learn more about as we go on. And then we've got male and female pedestrians all throughout Seoul. Like what I love is, like, when I look at all these characters, it's just like the amount of diversity of things that we can animate and pull from, and backstories and histories and interests and cultures. Like, it's just I just love like how much we can do with all these characters and how unique they all are. It's great. So I'm about to take us in the Wayback Machine to show some early like first prototype
Extremely
animation
early.
stuff. Like this was like super early. You're gonna see like crappy dashing, like jumping before we had procedural lands, like before we figured out the arc and all that stuff. But like I love
Oh my gosh!
I
look
love
at that.
seeing this, right? Because
Turning
like
pencil.
just like a pencil.
Yeah, like at the time, right? Like to get to this point, right? It took a lot of time. Like we spent the time figuring out like what this was going to take, what metrics were, and what the art was, the design, the tech, all of this stuff.
Land. That's not the plateau we were going for.
No, that was way too much hang time. But I just loved it, right? Like to me, this encapsulates everything that game animation is. Like that overlap of narrative and art and design, and how do we bring all those things together into this really great feeling, fluid work that I just love. And it's this team right here that I'm super proud of the team. I'm super proud of what we created. I'm super proud of their wardrobes. They've got fantastic fashion sense.
Oh my god,
For sure.
Yeah,
So great.
It was great, and I can't say enough good things about it. So, who's got some questions for us? That was the end of all of the presentation stuff.
Somebody was asking something earlier. Let me see if I can find it again.
I'll take that away.
Matrix Binging was asking, who is the last agent to be finished, animation-wise?
Let's see. The very last one would have been probably a mix. So we had animators, like each animator owned a different character, right? So like when we do these character streams, you're seeing like the animators in there are the ones that like were responsible for that character. So the last ones we had going concurrently were, I think, Jewel and Kingpin. Eric was working on those, and he was kind of like polishing them both up kind of back and forth as he went. Red Card and Daisy and Braddock kind of took a little while as well, because I'd done Fortune and Hardtack, and then I also ended up doing Braddock, and on top of like other lead responsibilities, she took quite a bit longer. But yeah. Whoa. So they kind of were happening concurrently there up towards the end.
What about the first ones?
First ones were Fortune and then Hardtack and Hollywood, and then Rama was pretty soon after that. Yeah. And then everything else just is kind of a blur in my head as to how they actually got done.
know.
I mean, truthfully, you have to do a lot of them in parallel, but that's
Right.
That's why we had to figure out how it worked before you could really send that off.
Yeah, going from 1 to 12 was a massive challenge.
I'm also not. I'm still like. I'm waiting to wake up and be like, wait, it's not. We didn't actually.
Nope.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that? Huh.
Yeah, I remember so many, like we sounded the alarm early on. We're like, what you are asking for is nuts. Like, games don't do this. They don't do this many playable characters for a reason, because it's just a lot. So we really had to embrace, obviously, a lot of new techniques that hadn't been used at Volition before, that we hadn't like specifically seen in other places before, to sort of bring it all together, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like these guys, everyone that you saw in that amazing picture, like came together to make something that I'm really proud of.
All right.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I guess it's time to wrap up, since this has been like a stream and a half. Holy moly.
Yes.
You're welcome.
It's a lot to cover in animation. But yeah, that was a presentation kind of on the behind the scenes stuff on animating the agents. If you haven't been seeing our streams before, each week we're streaming something new about our new game, Agents of Mayhem, which comes out August 15th. If you want to learn more, you can go to our different social media accounts, our website. On Twitter, it is at AOMTheGame, AOMTheGame.com for our website, and then just AOMTheGame for our Facebook account. We stream every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific, 22 GMT. And if you start coming back for the next couple of following weeks, we'll be talking about more of the playable agents. We've covered 3 so far, and we'll be getting to the rest soon. And thanks for watching. I'm Josh Stinson, the video editor here. We also had today...
Right. Evan Cox, lead not lead. I'm out. Lead tech animator on the other. That's me.
I'm Mike Jungbluth. Thank you for watching.
I'm Rob Rypka, senior animation programmer.
Ooh,
Correct.
I'm Vanier, and I am a programmer.
Young
Let's stick with
Bainey.
the original.
Young Bainey.
And then moderating the chat and just keeping an eye on things, talking to people. We had our community developer, Mike Watson, doing all that. Hi, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, we'll see you all next week, hopefully with some Yeti. So, yeah.
Yeti next week?
Yeti.
Oh, yeah, Yeti.
Later.